You are in the right place. If today you think we're going to be talking about how to build a brand that surrogates trust, and how that brand will help you stand out without having to compete on compensation. So we're going to walk through a real quick agenda. Let me get there. There we go. Okay. So the agenda today, we're going to quickly go through introductions. We'll talk through what is brand and what it's not, how to define your own brand position, and then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about surrogacy agency branding, some of the issues that we see right now, and then we'll wrap up talking about kind of a new brand tool that we have developed that everybody on this webinar is going to get access to. And a couple notes is we are recording this presentation, so we'll share these slides and the recording after our session, so you don't have to worry about taking screenshots or notes. We will do Q&A at the end of this call, but feel free to add any questions to the chat as they pop into your mind, and then we'll keep track of those and go through them at the end. And then yes, that famous gift box that you see, whose company name we will not mention yet, is just a hint of what's to come in terms of branding best practices. And then I have two disclaimers. The first one is, we know most of you are not in surrogacy to make gobs and gobs of money. And so you'll hear me use business terms about company valuation or product pricing and more kind of along those lines. But my point in doing so is not to offend anybody, but it's to show you that really strong brands will get people to exhibit irrational behavior, like spending too much money on something. Or in this case, it might be, in fact, taking less in compensation because they want to work with your brand. And then the last thing I'll say is I was actually just doing kind of a practice walkthrough, and some of this content might sound kind of mean towards agencies, and that is also not my intention. I think the goal is just to be very, very direct in how we're talking to you all today. And so I don't want to pull any punches for the most part. So if that makes sense, we will get started. So introductions, this is me. My name is Erin Quick. I'm the CMO. I'm also a co-founder at Simbe. My background, I worked with some of the world's largest brands for well over 20 years. I started at one of the largest branding agencies in the world in their San Francisco and New York offices. And then I left and started my own global branding firm and ran that for about 13 years. And I got to brand and or rebrand cities and sports teams and professional services companies and technology companies and nonprofits. And one of the coolest things was I got to see into the guts of major organizations in just about every industry, only to figure out that a lot of them have the same issues, but a lot of the good brands all do the same things. And so that's what I'm going to plan to share with you today, some of those best practices. And then how I kind of landed in the family building space is, for the last 5 years, I founded and I ran a B2B technology company in the adoption space. And probably not unlike many of you, I was inspired to work in family building, having built our family through adoption. And that company was actually, it was acquired earlier this year by the most ethical nonprofit in adoption. And because I think people get kind of addicted to the family building space, I wanted to stay, and I had some friends that introduced me to the folks at Simbe. And I was glad to join the Simbe team, and our goal is to help surrogacy professionals balance technology to create more humanness in surrogacy. It's somewhat of a heretical viewpoint, but we actually believe that using the right technology in the right places is the key to creating more humanness in surrogacy. So we'll talk a tiny little bit about that at the end. So what is a brand? I have used this metaphor for decades now, but the best metaphor that I use is that brands are basically like file folders in your brain, and they get filled up with all kinds of stuff. A lot of times people will say like, oh, brand equals logo. Logo is a component of a brand, but brand is so much bigger than logo. So these file folders of brand file folders in your brain get filled up with logos, dominant color associations, other associations like Geico Gecko, metaphors, we'll talk about that, messaging, Brand elements, which are secondary to your logo. We'll talk about those today. Songs, jingles, sounds, taglines. Like my kids, I can't, like the Arby's, we have the meats, and BK, have it your way. Just my kids repeat them again and again. Advertisements, and then also experiences, how people experience your brand. And so what I always tell companies is really strong brands get file folders in your brain. Weak brands don't get folders, they get forgotten. And so you'll hear me reference file folder again and again and again, but the goal of every brand is to be able to build that file folder in somebody's brain. And like I mentioned, brand is much bigger than logo, but sometimes the other thing that gets lumped into brand is reputation. But reputation, the way I like to explain those is reputation is what's happened in the past. It's a reactive result. Brand is a much more proactive approach. It's forward-looking and forward-leaning. And so the way I've always defined it is a brand is a promise of what the future will look like if I buy this product, if I work with this company, if I subscribe to this service. And if you do it right, brand is what gets people to exhibit completely irrational behavior, like spending way too much on a product, or in this case, picking an agency faster, or taking less in compensation just for the chance of working with you. And so I think for a lot of you, I think it's safe to say all of you have experienced irrational behavior around a brand in the past, whether it's a car or a handbag or a pair of shoes. You wanted the brand, you were lusting after the brand. And so that's that kind of irrational behavior that that brands will elicit. Another example, just as I know it's summertime, but I live in the Pacific Northwest where it is cold and rainy for 9 months out of the year. And so we take our outdoor gear very, very seriously, and we buy a lot of jackets. And so I thought this was a really interesting comparison just to talk about kind of that irrational behavior that brands can elicit. And for the record, I'm a huge Costco fan. I'm also at the age where I buy a lot of clothes at Costco. But I thought this was a good comparison. If I wanted a green down jacket, I could go to Costco and there's one for $25, or I could go to Patagonia and there is one for $500. Strong brands. And it's not to say that Costco doesn't have a strong brand, but I don't totally associate Costco with an outdoor gear in my mind. If I happen to come across it at Costco, it'd be a benefit, like, oh, surprise. But it wouldn't be, they don't own the file folder of outdoor gear in my mind. Strong brands like Patagonia do. And when you have one of those strong brands that has the file folder, you no longer have to compete at kind of the functional level. Is it warm enough? I have no doubts that every jacket Patagonia puts out is warm enough. If I'm at Costco, I would question it. And then also strong brands remove the need to use any kind of rational comparison. Like, is it worth the price? There's no way a Patagonia jacket is worth $500. There's no way you can get a nice down jacket, same level of down at Costco and the same level of down at Patagonia with that kind of a price differential. There's nothing rational about that decision. The only reason people are spending that amount of money is because, again, it's the brand. And so that lusting after the brand is exactly what the kind of the behavior that we want to be able to create when we are going out to market. And that lust behind the brand is because these brands have tapped into, this is another thing you'll hear me say again and again today, is because those brands have tapped into an emotional or a self-expressive benefit. If I am wearing this jacket, this brand, what does it say about me? If I wear a Patagonia jacket, I'm not just keeping warm, which is a functional benefit. I'm communicating to the world that I subscribe to this brand position around being a global citizen, which is kind of the emotional or self-expressive benefit. It says something about me. It says something about this idea of like they're 1% for the planet. Their theory and programming around recycling, both in the materials they use and in the recycle program that they have, which, by the way, if nobody knows about the Patagonia Kids Jacket Recycle Program, it's amazing. Yvon Chouinard and his book, he's the CEO of Patagonia, and his book, Let My People Go Surfing, which basically touts treat adults like adults in the workplace. They were the first company to put a daycare in the company so that the employees that were parents could bring their kids to work. So everything they do with kind of around this brand position, this idea of being a global citizen, from the products that they create, like, could Patagonia create a beautiful ball gown? Sure, they could create that, but they wouldn't, because that's not part of their file folder. That's not part of the target audience that they're after. Do people that wear Patagonia jackets also wear ball gowns? Sure. But the Patagonia brand knows where they should play, and they stick to it. The materials that they use, the product names that they use. So looking at this slide, 2 green down jackets. Costco's is called green. Patagonia's is named Old Growth Green. Again, like in service to this brand position about being a global citizen. So everything, advertising, marketing, HR, operations, everything is in service to this idea, this organizing principle, this brand position around being a global citizen. And for anybody that has ever seen their catalogs read like National Geographics. So point being, strong brands, file folder in your brain, but they also are incredible business assets. So they have a multiplier effect on a company valuation. So I know private equity is kind of a bad word in surrogacy, but should a private equity company ever come calling, if you have a strong brand, you'll get a multiplier. Product pricing. In this case, it's 20 times more expensive to get the Patagonia jacket versus the Costco jacket. Are they functionally better? I don't know, but I want the brand. So strong brands are also very, very good for building business. And the goal for every surrogacy agency brand is just that, to build a brand so strong that it gets surrogates to make some irrational decisions. And irrational is kind of a weird word, but we want to be able, what we mean by irrational is that we want them to be willing to forego $10,000 on comp just to get the chance to work with you. Because working with you, using your services, engaging with your brand, participating in your community, it says something about them. And so creating a brand position for your agency that has that emotional or self-expressive benefit that gets people to move from, oh, I like that, to, oh, I'm like that. Like those Patagonia, the Patagonia values, their values are around building the best products, causing no unnecessary harm, using business to protect nature, and not being bound by convention. I'm like that. I subscribe to those values. And so the goal is for your agency to also create a brand position that has that emotional or self-expressive benefit. And I will say, if this is intimidating anybody already, it probably should. It takes courage to put a stake in the ground around something that is unique and differentiating, and means that you might not be a brand that appeals to everyone, or might not be a brand that appeals to all surrogates. But committing to it does pay incredible dividends, and it gets people on or off your bus earlier. So, Erin, you're talking a lot about brand positions. I don't really know even what that means. So let's dive into that. So a brand position is kind of at the center for every strong brand, and it's from which that everything radiates. All of the touch points radiate, and we're going to walk through brand position and all those touch points. So brand positions should always start with the why. So there's this really famous guy in the brand world. He's been around for a couple decades now. His name is Simon Sinek. And I will, when we send out this recording, I'll send he has a pretty famous video on YouTube 20 years ago presenting to a bunch of Microsoft leadership. But the point that he makes, and the point that I've always agreed with when helping companies build their brands, is you need to start with why. Most companies don't. They start from kind of the outside in. And a lot of surrogacy agencies are guilty of this, where if you go to the homepage of your website, a lot of agencies will talk about the services that they offer. We have international programs, or we have surrogates that speak Spanish. Like, it's the what and the how. And then the why is usually kind of buried in the about us somewhere. But what happens is really successful brands, or kind of the truly inspiring organizations, actually start inside out. So they have a really strong brand position that starts with why. It talks about a belief system. And then from that, everything radiates: the how, the what, and all the various touch points. So I'm just gonna give you an example of a really strong why brand position that is incredibly unique and differentiating. So I'm gonna have you please read this. This is a company's brand position statement. It's just words on a page. There are no visuals here. There's no branding on this page, but I'm guessing you will know what company this is because they have created one of those file folders in your brain and filled it up so consistently in service to this brand position. So I think I'll give you just a minute, or if anybody wants to be brave and say what it is in the chat, go for it, if somebody knows what this brand is. Nobody's feeling brave. Okay, so the brand is Harley-Davidson. So Harley-Davidson, they're a motorcycle manufacturer. That's the what. Like if you went to their website and they're like, we make motorcycles, and they have big loud engines. Like great, that's the how and the what. But the why is where they make all their money. They make all of their money crafting this idea, this persona of an outlaw, and talking about personal freedom and a gang of cowboys. You could be an accountant by day, but once you get on that motorcycle, you're an outlaw. And that brand position guides everything they do, from all their brand, all their advertising, all their marketing, to the people that they hire, the food they serve in their restaurants, the nonprofits they participate in, literally everything. And so the goal of today is to get you thinking, like, what is it about working with your agency, your belief system? What stake are you willing to put in the ground around surrogacy or family building? Because I know a lot of you also do more than just surrogacy. But what is the stake you're willing to put in the ground that would make people feel a certain way when working with you? And I think even I was a little bit surprised to see that literally in the brand position for Harley-Davidson, they're talking about macho guys. Like their target audience is macho guys. Does that mean women don't buy Harleys? No, because women will also subscribe to this idea of outlaw. But in terms of their target audience, and we're going to talk a lot about this in terms of how to take this bucket of surrogates and to then niche them into the surrogates that make the most sense for you and your agency. So we'll talk a lot about that in just a second, because I think it's worth understanding that just because you niche or you focus on a particular type of surrogate doesn't mean that other surrogates won't come. It means that certain surrogates won't, but it doesn't mean that you'll be missing out as much as that. I know that can be kind of a frightening idea. Okay, so now we know we need to move from kind of what we do and talking about what we do to why we do what we do, or why someone should choose you. But how do we do it? So this is kind of the brand position formula. And again, nobody can just take screenshots. We're going to share out all of these slides so that you'll have this kind of formula. And I won't go through each step of this, but I do want to focus on a couple of the really, really important ones. So the first one around researching the market, knowing your target audience's wants and needs. So again, the more niche you can make your brand position, the better. And now that we launched our AI intake assistant, Riley, we've been talking to lots of agencies every week. And the one thing that I've noticed is that so many agencies just talk about surrogates. And all surrogates have kind of been bucketed into one category, when we know there are, as we kind of press and we talk to more and more agencies, like there is differentiation within the group of surrogates. But so I think that's kind of the first thing to think about is what types of surrogates are the best fit for you. And one of the best ways to do that is to talk to the surrogates that have already picked you. And this does not mean a satisfaction survey. This means really getting to know with surrogates, like, why us? What was it about working with us? And then really listening, not being too precious about the answers, to really, really listen to what they say. Because I think if there is a special skill in branding, it's the ability to translate what your target audience says they want or why they picked you, but says what they want or need, to turn that into that kind of emotional or self-expressive benefit that they actually want. And just an example of this, I'm sure people on this call have heard that Henry Ford quote that references kind of the late 1800s, where he says, like, well, if I if I would have asked people what they wanted in terms of their mobility, they would have said a faster horse. They wouldn't have said a car. And so, like another example of this is like Volvo. Like Volvo, when they were rebranding themselves years and years ago, they asked their audiences, the people that have already bought them. They said, "What was it about us?" or "What do you want?" And people said, "We want the most airbags." And what the Volvo marketers said is like, do they want the most airbags? Literally, because you could go to your car engineers and say, okay, like if 18 is the most airbags that exist on the market, we're going to have 19. So go, product engineers, go build a car with 19 airbags. But that's not what people want. They want the feeling of confidence. They want peace of mind when they put their most precious cargo, their kiddos, into a car, that car will act like a shield in the event that anything happens. So that translation of I want airbags to I need to know that my people are protected. That is the ability to translate kind of functional benefit, rational benefit into emotional, self-expressive benefit. And so Volvo, their brand position, no surprise, targets parents. Does that mean only parents buy Volvos? No. Anybody that wants that peace of mind around whatever their precious cargo is, maybe it's a kid, maybe it's a dog, anyone that wants that peace of mind buys a Volvo. And then that brand position is woven throughout everything that Volvo does. Like I think their tagline is over 1 million lives saved. And their advertising always has babies and kids in their ads. And so that is when we're talking about kind of researching the market, defining your audience, identifying what makes you unique, that ability to translate what people say into that emotional self-expressive benefit is kind of the magic of branding. And I want to mention that the experience that people have with your brand is included with that. And again, this is where I felt like I was being a little bit mean, and I don't mean to be with agencies, but agencies do a very big disservice to your brand when you mouth the words around, for example, if you say your agency is about the highest level of service or 24/7 service and support. And yet, literally the first experience that most surrogates will have with your brand is they'll fill out a form on your site. And when they are interested, when they have time, when they're doing their research, 7 p.m., and instead of being able to immediately get the information they need, they'll get a message from you saying, yeah, well, one of our people will get back to you when we are back in the office based on our schedule. So it's just that subtle difference in terms of experience. Like, but you said 24/7 service and support, and now I have to wait until you are ready to talk to me. Like there's a disconnect there. And it's more than just that. I think it's, you say you have former surrogates on staff, but you don't add any kind of like exponential value or insight or tangible data on what that means. Like, okay, so you get, on average, we get surrogates 36% more X. All right. Or you say your approach is really modern, but you're sending out paper contracts. That's a disconnect in terms of what the brand promise is and what the experience is. Or you say, like, again, like we'll support you 24/7, but you don't meaningfully check in. Or you're a priority, but every time you talk to the surrogate, you're in the car running errands. And so you're kind of like, your attention is fragmented. Those are experience disconnects with your brand. And so again, it's a huge disservice if you mouth the words, but the experience falls flat. And again, I if anybody is feeling like, oh man, this is a big lift in terms of being able to build this brand, this is going to be really hard. You're not wrong. But it can be a migration. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to flip a switch and everything is done at once. But I will say again, like brands take courage to build, but they are so worth it. Once you have a strong brand, it's very easy to keep it strong. And so this is the mantra that I would have my clients chant again and again and again, is that you have to be more afraid of being the same than you are of being different. And I will tell you, having done kind of a competitive audit on the surrogacy category, like, it is a sea of sameness. there is so much same, and I'll show you some of those examples in just a minute. But these brands do require conviction around the brand position that you want to own. And I will say one of the things I think the surrogacy category is guilty of is in trying to get any or all surrogates, most of you have become generic to all surrogates. Like there's nothing differentiating because you all say the same things. And so it takes courage to put a stake in the ground around something unique and differentiating. And it means that you might not be a brand that is open to everyone, but it does pay incredible dividends with the surrogates that you do want to attract. So building kind of branding touch points. So these are all the things that would go into those file folders. So brand position is always at the center. Your why is always at the center. And then all of the other various touch points will kind of radiate outwards from that inside brand position. And when these work together, you get a very, very powerful brand. And I've seen this in Fortune 50 companies, and I've also seen this in really small nonprofits. So this is not a function of marketing budget. This is just a function of conviction and knowing who you are and sticking to it. And so the other thing that to make this a little less intimidating is not all of these things have to be strong. If you have a really strong color association, you can have a weaker name. And just to give you a couple, I'll give you a couple examples of this. So I think little pop quiz here. So if I were to say, all right, you need to get a package across the country this week. Name a shipping company that owns the color brown. See if anybody's brave. Anybody brave in the chat? Amber, bonus points. Yes, exactly. So Brown, UPS owns, any of you that thought UPS, UPS owns a file folder, Amber, in your brain that owns the color brown. And not to get super geeky, but really dominant, strong color associations immediately help with recall. And I guess UPS has made this, it's not just a color association because they've also turned it into its color, its association, and its tagline, what can brown do for you? And this was a 10-year brand strategy. They said for the first 5 years, we're just are going to talk about brown. What can brown do for you? Brown, 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 brown. And then once we own brown in everybody's mind, we're going to shift to the word logistics. Logistics is where we want to get. We're going to own the word logistics in people's minds. And so that when companies, because that's where they make a bunch of their money is in company accounts. When companies have complicated logistics, UPS, like they want to think about that. So this brand can also be on kind of this migration strategy. Okay, here's another one. Okay, feel free. Amber, you already got bonus points. We'll let somebody else win this one. Who's this? This is simply a box with a ribbon. Crystal, yes, so it's just a box. But Tiffany's has done such a great job of owning that color robin's egg blue. So, you know, like when you see robin's egg blue, I have a really funny story to tell this group because it is now it's called Tiffany's blue. They actually registered the color. You're right, Crystal. But before they registered, it was called robin's egg blue. And so I think one of the things just to think about in terms of brand positions and, you know, these various touch points is there's no shortage of jewelry manufacturers. Like there's jewelry everywhere. You can buy jewelry, you can buy a ring anywhere. But when people buy a ring at Tiffany's, again, like back to emotional and self-expressive benefits, when people buy a ring at Tiffany's or they give someone the ring in that Tiffany's box, yes, they've bought jewelry, but the emotional or self-expressive benefit that they are actually buying is this impression, this like, what does it say about me? I love you more, or I think you're more special because I got it at Tiffany's. That's what people are actually buying. Same thing with like Apple computers, like, or iPhones. Like you can get a phone, sure, you can get a computer, but what am I actually buying when I buy Apple? I'm buying this idea of like hip creativity, interoperability, simplicity, working to get all my devices will work together. Like, that's what I'm actually buying. And so when you think about your own agencies and the experience people have, like, yes, they're buying a journey, but what are they actually buying? Is it confidence, peace of mind, luxury? Like what are the emotional or self-expressive benefits that they're actually buying? And so this is my really funny story that I'll just touch on really fast. Is a million years ago, we were working with this great big company, and the leadership did not believe that color could be as strong as it was. Their logo had 5 colors in it, and we were telling them, like, you really need to go down to a dominant color association. And they're like, no, we don't. 10 executives on this group. We bought 5 bags of a kind of a generic jewelry manufacturer, and then we had 5 Tiffany's bags and boxes in there, and we put all 10 executives in an elevator at different times, and without fail, not one person commented on the 5 generic bags, and all 5 executives that were holding that Tiffany's bag had some kind of comment like, "Oh, did you do something wrong, or is there a cool thing coming?" So everybody could see the bag and understood what it meant. And so we were able to get the executives on board in terms of changing their brand down to one color. But anyhow, so this idea that robin's egg blue as a color, as a representation of that emotional or self-expressive benefit in terms of what people are actually buying. And again, like they radiate it in, they have stores all over the world, and you better believe that in their commercial lease agreements, it says we have to be able to put Tiffany's blue somewhere. It has to be visible from, external of the store. And it's everything from their restaurants to their pop-ups to all of their commercial real estate. And the other thing I'll say is, because we would see this too, you better believe that the graphic designers at UPS are so sick of brown. And probably the same graphic designers are so sick of Tiffany's blue. But guess what colors are in the color palette for our brand? So it really, really matters in terms of being consistent. And it matters. So here, let's look at, so this is just associations. I'm curious who else can get this one. So there's no logo on this. Kobe. Yes, Eva. You guys are good at this. So yes, this is the power of an association. This is a polar bear with a Santa hat on, and everybody knows that it's Coca-Cola. I'm going to give you one more. This is what I mean by a brandiment. So a brandiment I define that as it's a secondary brand element. It's not the logo. It's a secondary brand element. In this case, kind of a ribbon, where if you covered up the logo because of color and brand element, you could tell what the brand is. And so here's a hard one. I'll be really interested. Which one is the actual Coca-Cola ribbon? These are all exactly Coca-Cola red cans. Yeah, okay, you guys get it. So I don't have to pitch that this is like you need to make a strong brand, or that brands help with recall. You're exactly right. That's the one on the right. Again, no logo. These are just elements that have been used again and again and again, and have been put into your file folders for these brands that help with recall. And when you're exposed to something again and again and again, it aids in familiarity. In which case, like you don't have to do anything differently. If you're just exposing people to the same thing over and over and over and over again, familiarity breeds liking. I mean, it's this weird thing that happens again, I won't get too geeky. It's this weird thing that happens in our brains. But in creating a very powerful brand, it would actually help surrogates like you more, even if they've never experienced your brand. Image style, this is another one. So image style, like Coca-Cola Classic, uses a very kind of vintage nostalgia like filter on all of their imagery. So when you pair that brandiment, when you pair the color, when you pair the associations, when you pair this image filter to their what could be stock photography if you take product placement out of it, like it starts to create the brand in your mind. Metaphors. Metaphors is another way to create strong brands. So we know Red Bull, it's named Red Bull. This company is named after big, strong Red Bulls, which could have been a metaphor for energy, but instead the company chose to use wings as a metaphor for energy. That Red Bull gives you wings. and it's the brand position. And they also then turn that into a tagline, and it's used at every touch point. And in fact, I don't know if anybody has ever gone to this competition. I got to see it once when I was living in New York, but they actually developed it to reinforce the brand about Red Bull gives you wings. They put on a contest every year called the Flutog, where they encourage teams. You have to enter to win, but teams will create human-powered flying machines, and they launch them off of a platform into the water. And literally none of them fly. They all just like fall off the platform and they're in the water. And then there's a contest winner named, but they named it the Flutog, which means flying machine. Again, as like associations to their metaphor around Red Bull gives you wings. So when you're crafting a brand position for your agency, like any one of these things can be strong. They don't all have to be strong, but creating one of these things that is strong, again, will dial up recall, familiarity, liking, all the things that you need to build a strong brand. Okay, let's get into surrogacy brands. So some of you might be thinking, okay, great, Erin, yeah, but these are all huge companies with huge budgets. Well, I've got bad news for you. The smaller your marketing budget, the more you should be pouring into building a brand that is unique and differentiated, because you don't have money to waste. You don't have money to be generic. These big companies they can try all kinds of things and something can flop. You can't. So you need to get people on or off your bus early so that you don't waste time and or money. And remember that brands are the ones that make it, they make it easier for the right people to find you. They make it easier for people to move through your process. Brands a lot of time are responsible for converting people faster. And we talked about this, like, all surrogates, and this goes for IPs too, I guess, but all surrogates and all IPs are not the same. They do share a common kind of end goal, but the motivations, the hopes, the fears, those are all different. And those are all opportunities to build a brand around. And yet nobody in surrogacy is really using the true principles of branding as a differentiator. And yes, there are some like big agencies, but big does not mean brand. And in fact, it could be an opportunity for smaller agencies to position against, because big just means like you can position the big ones as the Starbucks or the Microsoft or the IBMs of the category that are big and slow-moving factories of surrogacy, versus if I'm a smaller one, you better believe I'm positioning myself as like, you will never be a number here. The personalized service will floor you, that we're agile and flexible and no two paths are the same. So there are opportunities depending on kind of where you sit in the market, what the competition looks like around you. And again, like in addition to lack of a strong kind of why brand position, I think it'll be really interesting for you all to see kind of the next couple of slides, because they're going to focus on 4 areas of issue that I see for issues, but I guess opportunities too for agencies. So we're going to go through logos, messaging, naming, and design. So here's just a smattering of logos in surrogacy. So lots of trees, lots of leaves, lots of circles, lots of hearts, lots of that kind of abstract, flowy outlines of pregnant bellies, lots of purple and teal and pink. So are these appropriate for the category of surrogacy? Sure. Are they differentiating or unique or memorable? Would they help a surrogate make a decision about your agency? No. Do they tell a surrogate that you're probably just like the others? Yeah, probably. Yeah. Messaging. Most of the agencies that I have seen claim, decades of experience, expert coordination, former surrogates. And of course, it's all intended appropriately, like it's intended to build trust. But because everyone uses it, it starts to feel pretty interchangeable and generic. And I know I've been on calls with some of you who have said, like, they'll apply to us, and then they'll apply to 4 other agencies, and they won't remember who we are when we call them. And this is one of the reasons why. It's because it all sounds the same. And we'll take a look at some of the examples here. For the brave ones, I'm going to read a few of these, and I think one of the best ways to hear these words is to actually close your eyes when I'm reading them, because I think put yourself in the shoes of a surrogate and listen to this. So for those that want to, close your eyes. We believe that advocating for surrogates is the key to the smoothest and most successful surrogacy journey possible. Every surrogate that goes through our process gets a surrogate advocate who supports you one-on-one education and ongoing mental health support. We offer 24/7 unparalleled support with experienced surrogates committed to ensuring you receive fair compensation with no out-of-pocket costs. You will have the support of a full team by your side every step of the way. We are always with you and will strive to make this pregnancy incredibly rewarding. So again, I'm not trying to offend anybody, and all of those things may be true. And by the way, all of these messages were pulled off of the home pages of a website where the why brand position, emotional, self-expressive benefit, should be so blaringly strong. But these kind of what and how messages take center stage, and they all kind of echo the same thing, which makes it harder for surrogates to differentiate one agency from the other. And so I've also been on calls with agencies where they're like, all they want to know is about compensation. Well, compensation is literally, in so many situations, the only kind of apples to apples differentiator. And so you can't really blame them for using compensation when we're all saying the same things. And so, and I want to say, like, it's okay to say these things, but if you're gonna say it, let's figure out a visual way to say it, like visual messaging, visual language. And I'll show you an example about what I mean by that. For anybody that knows the company Liquid Death. So it's okay to say those things, but let's figure out a different way to talk about them that helps us build a file folder in her brain. So Liquid Death, and to be honest, I was really surprised when this brand came on the scene, because I was like, there's no way anybody else can innovate in the world of like bottled water. And in fact, the only innovations that had been done in kind of the water category were around the bottle, like it's more beautiful, or it's just like a commodity and it's cheaper. And so when these guys hit the scene, and for anybody that doesn't know this brand, this was a guy that worked with a lot of bands, like rocker bands, like Metallica. And he was noticing as they're getting older, they don't want to drink alcohol on stage. They want water. But, it's like, there's a disconnect if like Metallica's, rocking, or Black Sabbath is rocking, and then they're like, in my Fiji water bottle. And so he was like, oh, we should create a brand that's like they would feel comfortable drinking this water on stage, and it aligns to their brand. And so that was kind of the origin story of how Liquid Death came to be. That's like, they want to drink something that looks badass on stage. And it's like, so they built this brand that's kind of like rebellious, and it's alternative and edgy, and this counterculture, and it super resonated with like millennials and Gen Z people. But when you look at the language they used, they named the company Liquid Death. They were a water company and named it Liquid Death. Like, most people that were using rational brains to create a brand would be like, we can't name it Liquid Death. It's water. So it, like, there's like even that. And then they built this brand that is like, whoa, so edgy compared to like Fiji water bottles. And their mission ends up being their brand position, but their mission is to kill plastic pollution. They don't say stop or prevent plastic pollution. They say kill, because their name is Liquid Death. So those words, they become kind of visual. They create visual associations in your brain. Their hashtag that they use on everything, death to plastic, even the way that they name their products. So Berry It Alive is their berry flavored water. As they created new lines, like they introduced iced tea, and it says like, don't be scared. So they take the brand position, they take all of those associations, and they execute really, really consistently, that ride or die tea. So there's a way to say what you want to say, but how do we map what we want to say to this brand position that is unique and differentiating, so that it'll help us pick the right words for those kind of what and how messages when they're appropriate. I love the name Liquid Death. and because it is so crazy different from anything that existed in water. And so I want to spend just a minute on talking about naming with surrogacy agencies. So I'm not picking on anybody because I know some of your agencies are on this list, but it's just to illustrate that, if you put yourself in a surrogate's shoes, like your logos weren't differentiated, now the messaging isn't differentiated, the names, like we want them to choose you, but we're not giving them kind of the reasons to choose you because we've all named ourselves very similarly too. So there's lots of family, there's lots of love, there's lots of heart, there's like some that are like generic just based on locations that actually don't really map to the locations that they provide services in. So, and then multiple agencies share very similar names. So heart to hands, heart to heart, love and kindness, love and beyond. So it definitely is going to contribute to brand confusion for surrogates and IPs. It gives you all very weak search differentiation in terms of SEO and very weak recall. And then the other thing is so many of these are using these kind of compassionate terms, but because everyone is using them, it actually removes the authenticity of that compassion. Because if everybody's using it, it becomes generic. So we're doing a disservice to all of us, because I know, having met with so many of you agencies, that I know that you ooze compassion for these journeys, but yet the brand is you've kind of genericized it so much that it does it a disservice. And you might be saying, but Erin, like, doesn't our name have to say something about what we do? Names fall into classes, like liquid death. That's not descriptive. That's like, if anything, it's like opposite of what water is. So most of the surrogacy agency names fall under kind of the descriptive category, like lean cuisine. You have all lean cuisined yourself. Like wouldn't it be weird if lean cuisine started creating high fat food? They're never going to create cuisine that isn't lean. But then you can move to suggestive, like Netflix or Amazon. Amazon, for people that don't know, like, there are more species found in the Amazon than anywhere else in the world. And they use that name as a metaphor for there are more products found on Amazon than there are anywhere in the world. Even though they started with books, but they eventually, they knew what they wanted to grow into, and they named the company appropriately. Coined. You can come up with your own name, like Accenture. For those that don't know, the name, the origin of the name is from accent on the future. Oh, kind of dumb. But you better believe that in their Accenture's slide deck, anytime they're presenting to a major company for a multi-million-dollar contract, they talk about accent on the future. And it's a forward-looking statement that gets the company excited about working, like, what's possible when I get to work with Accenture. And then there's completely arbitrary, like Hulu, but there's a lot of, in the arbitrary category, names will rhyme, because if they're made up and they rhyme, it's easier for people to recall. So, and I'm not saying that, anybody needs to change their name necessarily, but if you aren't going to change your name and you're going to keep the name that you have, then I would say you need to over-index on design. So design can completely change the feel of a name. And so looking at that again, if you think about back to that logo slide, like how can we use design to completely differentiate our brand, even if it is just kind of veneering the brand for now until we decide on, like, what is our brand position and how do we create those kind of, all the various touch points. Like, design can completely change the feel of the name. Like, Harley Davidson could be Tiffany's, like if it was Robin's Egg Blue and scripty type, like it could be Tiffany's. And for Harley Davidson, they've just done a really, really good job of creating that file folder that has flames and wings and eagles and patriotism and riveted metal and images of like wind in your hair and big motorcycle handles. Like, that's what actually makes the Harley brand. It's not necessarily the name and the logo. The logo definitely helps, but it's not necessarily the name. And so you can use the kind of the branding best principles around design to make a generic name open up a file folder. So this is a really simple test. I think if any of you are like, I don't know if we have a strong brand after this presentation, it's a simple test, but you could say, like, if you're looking at your website and you cover up the logo, Would I be able to tell what agency it is? And I will say most of the surrogacy agencies that I've seen are actually pretty good in terms of production level, like large format video and good amounts of white space. But if I cover up the logo, is there anything else? Is there a color? Is there a brand element? Is there a metaphor that's used again, or association, design? Like, is there anything that I can tell, like, oh, I know what this, an image style, that I would know that, oh, it's that agency. I know that agency. Brand pattern, anything that would make it stand out. And if the answer is no, then you probably have a little bit of work to do. And I will say this too, because a lot of people get fearful, but like, again, I've worked hundreds of companies, large and small, and there is something unique about every single company. And I know there is probably something unique about your agency, whether it's a belief, a process, a promise, whatever it is, there is something in your agency that you do that is different than other agencies. And we just need to be more afraid of being the same as all the other agencies as we are of being different. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit, we're kind of at the last section. I know we're getting really close to time. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about 2 tools that we have. One of them can help you with this brand process, because when I was creating brands for companies, it was, they're hundreds and thousands of dollars sometimes to create. And so I wanted to create a tool, or the team here wanted to create a tool for you all that could at least get you started. And so we created, we call it the Simbe Brand Center. And I'm going to make sure that this link goes out to all of you, but just as an example. So it is a GPT. I think most people are probably familiar with ChatGPT. We created our own GPT that is configured with the best principles around branding, but specific to surrogacy agencies. And so we'll send you the link. You use it just like ChatGPT, and it will help kind of guide you through the process of creating something that is unique. And will it spit out the best brand position for you right off the bat? No, but it will get you probably 65 to 70% of the way, and it's a free tool, and it will at least get your brains thinking. And of course, I'm always happy to help companies as they're going through this too, because as you can tell, I'm kind of obsessed with brands. And then while I have you, I'm going to be completely self-serving and tell a few of you just about Riley if you don't know what we do at Simbe. Again, we believe that our job is to help surrogacy professionals like you bridge technology to create more humanness. It's totally heretical, but to use technology to use technology in a way that will be able to create more time for you, the humans, to spend with the humans on these journeys. And so really, really fast, Riley is our AI intake assistant. Again, we talked about that brand experience earlier today, where it's like, we give you 24/7 subversive support, but it's going to be on our terms, not when you're ready to talk about it, surrogate. We'll get back to you when we're ready. Like, Riley nips that in the bud. So fully customizable to your agency, phone, chat, text. I'll give you a little hint, because we now have agencies that are live now. Some of them are on this call, that the majority of surrogates are choosing text and chat, not phone, which I think has always been kind of a worry for surrogacy agencies. Like, what if they feel like it sounds too robotic? Well, and by the way, most surrogates are preferring to chat and text with AI versus a human. And I'll share a statistic with you in just a second, or a quote from one of our live agencies that talks about they're actually getting more people through the process faster because of that. Anyhow, the Riley can speak in your agency's tone, your values, or your brand position, can educate while qualifying, delivers qualified leads, and she's always on. She never sleeps. So she will immediately engage with a surrogate when the surrogate is ready. And this is just kind of a flow. If you do paid outreach, Riley can integrate with any paid outreach. If you don't, if you just have a website or a quiz, Riley can integrate with that. Gives surrogates immediate access to phone, text, or chat, and then can walk through your qualifying process, whatever that is. Can green flag, yellow flag, red flag surrogates, doesn't have to disqualify anybody, but can give that information to your intake people. If it's a green flag, she can automatically send the application. We're now starting to host applications for agencies so that we can help get people through that process. So I won't spend too much time, but oh, Crystal, you are so nice. But if anybody wants to chat about that, we are more than happy to. And this is a quote from one of our agencies that's live, but it's been interesting to see how many more suitable candidates we seem to be finding and getting them all the way through the process. Because again, I think it's, especially surrogates today are people that would sometimes prefer to talk to AI than an agency person at the initial onset. And then the last thing I'll say, last kind of self-promotional idea is we launched a podcast. We've got one episode live. They're coming out every 2 weeks. We're talking about tech and surrogacy. We're talking about private equity and surrogacy. We talk about bad actors in surrogacy, talking to agencies, talking to attorneys. So this is live. Go find us, follow it, the Future of Surrogacy podcast. And if you have a topic you want to discuss or somebody you think we should interview, just let us know. And I'm very grateful. I know this was a lot of time and probably felt like it was sipping through a fire hose, but this is my email address. Feel free to email if you have questions, and we will be happy to answer them. So let's see here. Anybody, was there any questions put in the chat? Oh, yeah. Okay. I see all these smart people talking about brands. Kobe, I do want to name a complicating factor that I think exists in surrogacy marketing, which is that too stylized is actually not good resonant. This is an industry where we get many accusations of exploitation, even trafficking. Graphics, images that are too stylized become folder for critiques that we are treating people like commodities or the product. Okay, I think that's really interesting. And I've got a really good brand example for you. So a million years ago, we were working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And they are obviously a very well-funded nonprofit. And we were doing an annual report for them. And one of the criteria for the annual report was like, hey, this can't be on like glossy paper. This can't look too slick. Like this has to be, let's use matte. The production quality can be good, but let's not give off these visual clues or tangible clues that we're like, we've got more money than God, And so I think you're probably exactly right. There's some criteria to the category of surrogacy, knowing that this is something that people are paying attention to. And so I think there are, too stylized, too slick. You're right. But what is the right kind of balance to strike in terms of, compassionate, warm, friendly, again, these kind of personality characteristics would need to tie back to your brand. But I think it is something to take into consideration and when you're going through that process that we outlined in terms of developing your brand position, that's something that would be involved in that. So that when you're coming up with the actual brand, that you'd be aware of that. Danielle, your note taker is amazing. Okay, I think that fills the question. So if anybody has any other questions, holler, let me know. And thanks for your time today.